Atomic Revenge Chronicles. In this series, people share their most brutal stories.
Don't kill the neighbor's dogs. I have a crazy, socially isolated elderly aunt who lives in the mountains of West Virginia. She's a mean, nasty old woman who was once suspected of shooting her ex-husband. However, the police were never able to pin the case on her. Years ago, she bought a small house on a plot of land bordering another family's property. It was a narrow, isolated mountain valley covered in forest. The other family had lived there for a long time. Like most people who choose to live in remote mountain areas of West Virginia, they just wanted to be left alone. At some point, my aunt got herself some chickens and started letting them roam freely across her unfenced land. One day, without any warning, she shot the neighbor's dogs because they had killed one of her chicks. Only one of the dogs was on her property. She shot the other one in the neighbor's yard. The neighbors had small children who adored those dogs. My aunt came over with a shotgun and threatened them, saying they'd better never get another dog or she'd kill those too. The neighbors took the killing of their dogs very personally, and her threats and waving the gun around crossed every line. But they didn't call the police. They knew that with my aunt's reputation, she probably wouldn't be arrested. And if she was, she'd be released in a couple of weeks and come right back. When my aunt went to town, someone smashed the back window of her house and threw in a Molotov cocktail. By the time the fire department got there, the house was completely destroyed. The shotgun, likely the same one she used to kill her ex-husband, burned along with all her belongings. The house, the chicken coop, everything was gone. The neighbors said they didn't see anything, and the sheriff's department couldn't prove a thing. My aunt had a long list of enemies. She didn't work and was too poor and lazy to get insurance on the house, so she had to move. Her son ended up buying her a cheap run-down trailer in town. Those who knew her figured she got what she deserved. The moral of the story: don't harm the dogs of neighbors who live in the mountains.
Flat tires for a snobby Porsche lady. This happened when I lived in Florida in the early 90s. It involves an act of vandalism tied to revenge, so I hope my post doesn't get deleted. South Florida was hit by Hurricane Andrew. My father, a member of a charitable organization, spent his days collecting donations at the local market to deliver to food banks. You have to understand, this hurricane left many people homeless and without electricity, sometimes for over 6 months, and that's in Florida's heat and humidity. My father was officially disabled after a serious car accident in the early 80s. He was hit by a drunk driver. He suffered from constant leg and back pain, but his hardship never soured his spirit or his kindness toward others, so he devoted himself to charity work. One day, he wanted to park in a handicap spot at the local market to pick up a few things for the hurricane relief effort. Just as he was about to pull in, a woman in a bright red Porsche took the spot. My dad pulled up behind her and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I was just about to park there," and pointed to his handicap placard in the window. She replied, "You don't look disabled," and walked into the store. Anyone who has a disabled relative who parks in designated spots knows of the frustration and anger these moments cause. My dad, looking completely calm, waited until she was inside. Then he got out of his car and removed the valve stems from all 4 of her tires so they would deflate. He stood nearby and just waited. About 15 minutes later, the woman came out of the store and started screaming that vandals had ruined her car. My dad stood far enough away that she couldn't see him, but he heard everything. She called the police. Big mistake. She filed a vandalism report, and the police gave her a ticket for parking in a handicapped spot without a placard. The fine at the time was around $250. The police left, and she called a tow truck. While her car was being loaded up, my dad drove by and said, "You don't look disabled, but your car sure does now," and drove off. My dad could be the sweetest man, but when necessary, he was brutally tough.
I didn't commit nuclear revenge, I committed universal revenge. Here's some background first. I worked as a pest control technician for over 10 years and was just a few credits short of a degree in entomology. I know everything about creepy crawlies, bed bugs, mites, blood-sucking parasites. You can probably guess where this is going. And to stop your imagination, no, I've never intentionally infected anyone. One of the kindest women I've ever met, we'll call her Mary, was a nurse during World War II. I was called to her subsidized apartment after the administration reported a minor insect issue. What I found was far from minor. What I saw still haunts my nightmares. When Mary opened the door, she was covered in bedbugs. In her hair, on her clothes, even on her hands. They were everywhere. Without getting into the gruesome biology of these insects, let's just say it was horrifying. Bedbugs don't like touching human skin and don't hunt when people are moving. That's why beds are their favorite habitat, hence the name. I immediately called an ambulance and waited for them to arrive. I warned them that wherever they took her, there was a serious risk of infestation unless they decontaminated her. The poor woman was suffering from anemia, and biologically speaking, it was a miracle she hadn't gone into toxic shock from the sheer number of bites. They hosed her down, took her clothes, and rushed her off. I went into full-on battle mode. Bedbug treatments are expensive, very expensive. But because I worked in public health, I had lots of contacts in the local social services and elder protection agencies. I called everyone. Turns out subsidized housing has rules, including mandatory inspections. To reach that level of infestation, inspections had to have been ignored for years. That poor woman had been eaten alive for ages. I called the local news, warned all the neighbors, and gathered testimonies about how often staff and management entered the apartments. Once I got social services involved, I urged everyone at risk of infestation to file civil suits and recommended a lawyer I'd worked with before. He was more than happy to take on the cases as a class action. Eventually, the apartment manager was arrested for elder abuse and neglect, and the entire staff was fired. They had been falsifying inspection records and claiming to do repairs they never did. They also ran multiple scams, billing the government for services they didn't provide. When it was all over, I kept visiting Mary for a while. Apparently, no one had visited her in years. She was a wonderful person, and she didn't deserve that life. Her health improved for a time, but eventually, her time came. I'll never forget her, and I'll never forgive the people who let that happen.
I destroyed a marriage and a family for revenge. I've always been the black sheep of the family. My cousins grew up to be doctors, professors, creatives, and all sorts of impressive people. Meanwhile, thanks to a few business decisions, I ended up with a modest passive income. Nothing fancy, but I can afford a 2-bedroom apartment in New York and live comfortably, working part-time at a cafe. Every member of my family, including my own parents, harshly judges me for not striving to be like my cousins. Especially my cousin, let's call him Randy. Picture a stereotypical rich bro who got wealthy working for his dad. Multiply that image by 10, that's Randy. Most of the crap I've gotten from my family came from him. Eventually, I stopped caring because I was happy, living with my partner, working part-time, and doing what I love. Randy has a wife and 2 kids, and a mistress. I found out because one day, walking through the city, I saw him hugging some random woman affectionately. I checked Facebook and saw he'd checked in at a bakery in our town that morning, supposedly on a business trip. I decided to see where this went. I followed them for 5 hours and took several photos, including one of them entering a hotel together. I kept the pictures and waited for Christmas dinner, about 6 months away. Right before dinner, I casually dropped the printed photos in front of everyone at the table, specifically in front of his wife. I told her she might find them interesting. Screaming and fighting followed. I got a black eye, not from Randy, but from his dad. Then came the police and a bunch of interrogations. My girlfriend and I were kicked out, and after talking to the cops one last time, we went home. What happened next?
Aside from Randy's wife and one cousin who hates him, my entire family cut me off for years. Even my parents, who were always disappointed in me for not living up to my potential, stopped talking to me. But I didn't mind. Randy got divorced. He lost full custody of his kids after threatening his ex. The family keeps trying to get me to apologize to him, but I just say things like, "I'm not apologizing for exposing his cheating."
Thanks so much for watching. Share your own Atomic Revenge stories in the comments below, and don't forget to check out our other videos. Big hug, see you soon.